which is a best-selling drawing course book, which I bought a couple months ago, and that's how I found out about Betty. She did her dissertation in art education and psychology at UCLA, I think, and lays out a really interesting theory about drawing education and its roots in brain lateralization. And I'll let Betty take it from here, and maybe you can introduce yourself, and then we'll go around and introduce ourselves, and then you can give the talk portion of the discussion.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Darius. Is the sound okay coming from here? It's very low coming from there. So if I'll listen very carefully. So I'm happy to be here with you today. I really don't have a prepared statement as such, and essentially we'll just be discussing. I've been reading a bit about the work some of you are doing in education, and I think possibly the work I've done might contribute something. So here we go. My book was first published in 1969, and in the book, I have suggested, I hit on what I thought were 5 basic skills of drawing. And to my surprise, it turned out to be that way. Ordinarily, art is thought of as subject matter, how to draw the figure, how to do still life, how to do landscape drawing, and so on. But the fact is, it's quite like reading itself, that there are very few basic skills which can be learned at a very early age, like say 6 or 8 or 10. And those skills are just as reading is useful in learning in general. My view is that the skills of the perceptual skills of drawing are useful in all other fields. And as it turns out, the human brain is specialized in language is actually located in the left brain. The right brain is largely without language, other than familiar words and so on, familiar sentences, and thinks in a global sense, not in a step-by-step, one thing at a time, as is the case with the left hemisphere. So with that, my hope is that education will change and introduce drawing along with reading as the twin in childhood training. Children at around age 7 or 8 are mad about drawing. Almost all children draw when they are young. They can't solve the problems of drawing, and at a certain age, they are actually told, well, you have no talent for drawing. Any of you had that experience? And the child gives up drawing forever. But if you think about it, if we thought that reading was a skill that depended on talent, and that there was no step-by-step learning procedure as there is for drawing, and if a child could not learn to draw on his or her own, then the child would say, well, I guess I have no talent for reading. And that would be set aside forever. And this is what happens with drawing. So my ambition is that young kids will be given proper instruction in drawing when they are avid to learn at an early age, and be taught drawing not for art's sake, but for thinking, to involve the right hemisphere of the brain at an early age, to train it up for what it does best, and change education forever. Now, we live in a left-brain society. Yours perhaps not as much as ours. I have no idea. It's getting worse and worse. I'm sorry to say. And our education is focusing more and more and more on left brain skills. There are very few art classes left in American education, because the time is taken up with testing. Is your education, I'm wondering if your education is the same, but students complain about this, that school has become so boring and there is so much emphasis on endless testing. The testing is multiple choice questions, the worst of all possible kinds. And it's education in America, I'm afraid, is failing. What shall we do about it? Well, the educators are just coming down hard on more and more left brain education. So I think we're in a sort of dire strait. And the teaching of drawing is not very difficult. When I wrote the book in 1969, I myself thought that there were endless skills to drawing. And what I tried for was to locate, to find the most important skills. And there were 5 that I found that I thought were really important. But the book was published, and about almost a year later, I was driving on the freeway, and it came to me in a flash of insight that those 5 skills were it for basic drawing, for simply making a sensible drawing of something that you have looked at, have seen. That was very exciting to me, because what it meant was that those 5 skills could be taught very quickly and very efficiently. My group and I then started a 5-day class. At first I thought, we'll never be able to teach drawing in 5 days. But in fact, we did. Now, what are those 5 skills? They are perceptual skills. They're not drawing skills at all. It's the perception of edges. Where does one thing end and another thing start? Spaces. What are the shapes of the surrounding spaces? relationships. How big is this compared to that? And lights and shadows. What are the shapes of the shadows caused by whatever the lighting is? And finally, what I've simply called the gestalt, that as a result of using those 4 basic skills to learn to draw, you see the whole. The whole is described. When you think about it, there are also 5 basic skills for reading. And well, I say there are 5, but this is not agreed on in the education community. Some have 10, some have 20, some have 3, and so on. But the Education Reading Society landed on 5, and they are phonics, the alphabet, and the sounds.
They're right on your left.
Oh, yes, right.
On the computer.
Oh, yes, right.
There in the middle. In the middle.
Oh, yes, right. Yeah, I have to review this. The point is that there are 5 reading skills, basic skills, and there are 5 drawing skills or perceptual skills. So the reading skills are phonetic awareness. These all have education terms. Phonics, fluency, I'll come back to that. Vocabulary, and finally comprehension, which is the twin of the gestalt in drawing. I'll come back to fluency. Fluency, in my view, fluency occurs in every list of basic skills for reading. What is fluency? You're able to read easily, read aloud easily, have no problem with pronunciation, whatever. In my view, fluency is not a basic skill. It is the outcome of learning to read. You become fluent after you have learned how to read. But I stand alone in this because every list of basic skills in reading includes fluency. And I'd love to hear what you all think about that. My work, in fact, all of the sort of right brain, left brain referenced work has been harshly criticized, I think, and really made fun of, that you're either from Mars or you're from Venus and that sort of thing. But the work has stood up over time. I was fortunate to slightly know Roger Sperry at Caltech in Pasadena, California. And Sperry painted in his free time. When I finished the manuscript for the first book, with great tremors of worry, I sent the manuscript to Sperry to see what he would think about it. He wrote me a letter after he read the book, and I still remember the first sentence: "I have just completed your marvelous book." It was, it was astounding, really, to have this kind of scientific approval. And he even wrote a little blurb for the first printing of the book, the first edition. which was a sentence that started out with ... And then he wrote a lovely sentence recommending the book. So I asked Barry next time I saw him, I said, well, why did you put the ... at the beginning of your blurb? And he said, well, in case I'm criticized for recommending such a book, I have an out that the first part of this is omitted. Recommendation. Sperry had a great sense of humor.
For anyone who isn't familiar, Sperry is like the
Yes,
one who did the split brain experiments in the 60s.
yes,
He won a
right.
Nobel Prize for, which is in
Yes,
every
he won the
intro
Nobel.
neuroscience class.
Yes, right, right. And after that, the book was published, and to my surprise and to everyone's surprise, it went on the bestseller list and stayed there for a year, which indicates, I think, the great longing that people have coming from childhood when they couldn't solve the problems, the great longing people have to be able to draw, just as we would have great longing to learn to read. And just incidentally, when I was teaching at community college, I had a student about 40 years old who had never learned to read. And in our spare time, or if we had it, I taught him to read. And it was absolutely fascinating that he had never learned the very basics of reading. And yet because he was so intelligent, he had been able to make his way through life by conning other people to read things to him. So each of these skills, these are twin skills, really. You can think of it that way. Language is in the left hemisphere, mainly. Spatial functions in the right hemisphere, mainly spatial and perceptual. And the brain is organized in this way. Worldwide, how did it, over 500,000 years of human history, the brain divided and yet still connected. The hemisphere is connected by a thick band of nerve fibers called the corpus, the large body, the corpus callosum. And so closely two separate, it's brilliant really, separate hemispheres, one containing a style of thinking which is essentially linear, step by step, like words in a sentence, solving problems in that way. The other half of the brain, mainly visual, solving problems by seeing what's out there and seeing it completely, not just parts, not just what it wants. Well, we're very good at seeing what we want to see, but I think the left brain is involved in that. And this enables us to accomplish a task that requires step-by-step kind of thinking, at the same time monitored by the brain half that sees the whole picture, how things are fitting together, how is it going to work? If there are questions, nudging its partner, say, my favorite thought is that its question, since it doesn't have much language, is, hey, what about ... Hey, what about you're leaving something out, something's gone wrong, and nudges us into going back and looking at what we're doing with new eyes, as the saying goes. So essentially that's, I'm sure I've left out a lot of stuff, but I'll rely on your questions to keep me on track. So shall we start with that, Darius? Shall we?
Sure. I guess we could, huh?
Why don't you ask the first question?
Well, I think I would like Anita or Viola or Josh who did we did a short workshop earlier today. We did the face drawing, a pure contour drawing, an upside down drawing, a negative space.
The upside down drawing, good.
Yeah, and then we tried a Sargent copy after all of those. Yes, I think Anita's probably bursting with things there. So I guess we could introduce ourselves in an ad hoc way. So when you have a question, you can also introduce yourself. And I guess speak closely to the microphone if you can.
You've really turned the tables. You put me on the spot. Normally I put you on the spot.
How did your drawing turn out, Anita?
The first one with the vase was, I think I can speak for Darius and say not very good at all.
Aha, that's interesting.
But
That's interesting.
and I could feel my head hurt as I went through the exercises. And when he gave us,
Yes, right. That's your left phrase. Say, don't you dare do drawing.
I think so. And when he showed us the portrait at the end and he asked us to draw it, my heart sank and I thought, oh God, I wish I could escape. And upside down is the only way I can draw it. And it turned out, I left 30 minutes early and so it's not done, but it's so much better than it should be. And so the upside down method is, I only got this far before I had to
Oh, I
leave.
wish I could see that clearly.
But,
Oh, very good indeed.
It's the portrait of Yates.
but if I had to ask, to introduce myself, my name is Anita. I'm one of the co-directors of Building 21, along with Olivier, who will introduce himself later. But since Darius came excitedly into Building 21 and excitedly started telling us about you and your method and your book, the first thing that I did was I replaced art with math. And just now, as you were speaking, I replaced math again with dance and so many other things. And I feel like you've just given me so many ideas for things to explore. And my own background is physics, and I've often wondered why we can't teach the creative element of math exploration. And
Yes,
I really think that there's something in this method that you've discovered that is fantastic. So thank you so much for joining us, for sharing your thoughts. And this is just wonderful. I don't really have a question, I guess, unless you have thoughts on extending your method to other disciplines.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, you should have been taught to draw at probably around age 7. And kids can learn it very well at age 7. Any other question? Any other?
Anyone else? Who's there?
Please do.
I had a question. My name is Viola. I'm working on a project here. I don't know which way to look. Yeah.
Just talk to the owl.
And I was also at the workshop earlier today. I was curious about how you came up with these exercises. Like, was it based on something that had been that you'd been taught earlier, or was it really entirely based on your principles, or kind of what was the process behind creating these exercises? Because they are really quite impressive, the results that come out of them.
Yes. Well, I was teaching, as I mentioned, at Venice High School in Los Angeles, a middle class, working class high school. And it was my first teaching job. I thought that I would start out, I thought I'll just teach the kids how to draw, and then we'll move on to some interesting stuff. And to my great surprise, the students couldn't learn how to draw. Their drawing skills remained the same no matter how hard I tried. And so one day I said to them, I came in with a Xerox copy of it wasn't Picasso, but another one that is in the book. And I said, right, you're having trouble drawing. Today we're going to be drawing upside down. And I handed out the drawing, asking them not to look at it right side up, but just simply to draw it. The kids thought I had lost it, gone wrong. But they agreed to do it, and soon the room became very quiet, and they all did the drawing. We hung them all up on the board when they were finished, and they were all good drawings, good copies of this quite complicated figure drawing. And I said to them, how come you can draw upside down? You can't draw right side up. And the students said, we didn't know what we were drawing. And I said, well, why would that help? And they said, I don't know, but it did. So they got sort of interest in the problem. And from there on, I did the vase faces with them and some other exercises. And it was really those students at Venice High School that were the start of all this. Soon I began teaching the individual skills that I mentioned, and soon the students were doing really good drawings. So, so that's where the ideas really came from. It came from the students, actually, really. As I say, they got interested in it, and we had a marvelous time figuring things out. I still remember it as the happiest time of my life in teaching, except for one incident when there was a terrible commotion. A student called out, Mrs. B, Molly has cut off her finger. I rushed to the back where we had a big paper cutter. I knew it was dangerous, and of course it was a big joke. Other than that, those are the days. It was great fun, actually. And then the success of the book, what that said to me was that there is out there a great longing to be able to draw. It dates back to, as some of you may know, prehistoric drawings up to 50,000 years ago on the walls of caves deep inside mountains. Prehistoric drawings on those walls are absolutely gorgeous. Human beings started out drawing, but language has, and especially written language over the past 1,000 or so years, written language has taken over. We need to get back to it, I think. Some other question? It doesn't have to be a question, just a statement.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a question. My name is Emil. I'm a law student and I'm working on a project here at Building 21. And my question would be about specifically what you just said regarding maybe the way we have shifted towards a left
Not stand up.
No,
but
no,
just
but
speak
just I
louder.
wanted,
I don't know what
Okay.
he's
do I
telling
have
me
to
to do.
get closer or?
I see. Everyone's doing this. I don't know what they're saying.
So you have said that we have maybe shifted towards more of a left brain society. And that maybe it was not always the case, but I wonder, how would you imagine a society today that would incorporate more of the right brain ideas? I have an issue imagining that. Do you have any ideas of what it could look like maybe?
Well, yes, I think the first thing that has to be done is that children need to be taught drawing along with reading at a young age, not to become artists, but to improve thinking. The right hemisphere is capable of seeing the whole picture and how the parts fit together. Given a problem, this is an enormous advantage. So kids need to be taught to draw, not for art's sake, although there is that also, but for the kind of thinking that the right hemisphere does. Global thinking, thinking about all the parts, accepting contradictory information, which the left hemisphere will not do if it's in the midst of a train of thought, a train of action. Left brain will not agree to it. We'll say, don't bring a Chrysler automotive executive put it very well one day. He was asked why the company had kept on building those large gas guzzling automobiles when design and the need to save on gas became evident. He said, he was asked, why did you keep on building those cars? And the executive's response was, we were in the middle of our 5-year plan. Oh, that is such a left brain statement. If it starts on a problem, it has to finish it step by step by step in a linear, one step at a time way. Right brain is different. Right brain looks at the whole problem and is able to see changes that will affect the plan, to be uncomfortable about mistakes that are being made, will nudge you wordlessly, give you a headache, whatever, to try to get you to pay attention to what is going on all around. It tends to see globally, not step by step. Now, left brain is, the left brain is competitive. It wants to stay on. It wants for its thinking to prevail. That's my phone ringing.
It's one of those.
It's one
It's
of those.
blocked.
Oh, okay, okay. See if I can find my way back to where I was. The left brain is helpful in seeing what's going on right now, not a 5-year plan or a step-by-step procedure, but what's happening right now, and is able to see rapidly changing information in order to improve thinking and not find ourselves in a process that has been pre-planned, but at the end we say to ourselves, why did I continue doing that when I should have known it wasn't going to work out? Have you ever had that experience? Right. The right hemisphere was over there trying to tell you. It was seeing what was going on. It was nudging you to do something, but it doesn't have language to explain it all to you. You have to, quote, see the problem. Now, how do you do that? That's the hard part to explain. It is, I think, just being aware of your own brain, of not allowing your left brain to dominate. It's not very reliable. You know, left brain lies a lot. You probably have experienced this, where if it doesn't know the answer to something, it makes it up in order to have an answer. It just makes up the answer. And it has language to do it, and it can be very convincing. Well, something may be nudging you and saying, that's not true, that's impossible, or whatever. You have to pay attention to that. And how can I say it? I think that learning to draw as the entry-level skill puts you in better touch with that half of your brain. Any response to that?
Yeah, I love it.
But that's very interesting. I mean, thank you so much for the answer. And I guess, is there a link with what we might call intuition, or is that completely different? Yeah.
Yes, there is a link to intuition. What we call intuition is really the right brain nudging us. I'm sure of that.
I love it.
Hi, I'm Josh.
Just to make sure she can hear you.
Hi, I'm Josh. I'm a software student, just started at McGill, and I'm pretty new at Building 21. And yeah, so my question for you is, like, what are your thoughts on things like IQ tests and things of that sort, and how much we rely on those kinds of things in order to evaluate people in our society?
Well, I think even educators are realizing now that IQ tests can be very destructive. In general, what IQ tests are tests of how well you do with language. Are you good with language and with numbers and with systems and so on? And I do think that someone would say to me, well, how would you test for right brain skills? You know, and there you couldn't have a test that requires people to draw if they have never been taught to draw. You know, so we're in a kind of a quandary when we decide we're going to teach IQ, to use IQ tests to separate people from certain universities or whatever. And I'm not an expert on testing whatever at all. But it does seem to me that we are testing our students into oblivion almost. And we need to find better ways, I think, to evaluate a person's brain. How good a problem solver are you? And not just problems of numbers and words. Education is greatly flawed, and it's your generation, I think, that will change it. We are much more visual these days than we ever have been before. And that may be a help. I don't think I've answered the question. Maybe you could give it to me again. Try again.
I guess I could rephrase it a bit in a different direction. So I guess we're using a lot of IQ tests now, and there are other tests that people use in more particular cases, such as just trying to come up with like solutions to real world problems, tests that evaluate more so those kinds of open-ended questions. So would you say that maybe like those kinds of skills are very related to this, and maybe to also in order to help develop those kinds of problem solving skills,
Yeah.
other skills such as like on ethical issues, that this would be a better direction
Oh,
to go in?
yes, absolutely. And in fact, if that is happening, I'm very happy to hear it, very happy. And it will be your generation that makes this change. And my hope is that education will begin to teach drawing skills, perceptual skills in the early grades. And then you have something to work with. And it will be your generation of educators, I think, that will make the difference. And that we won't be making hideous mistakes, such as are going on in the world right now. That's very hopeful. I mean, I'd love to hear that you think that might be a possibility. It's my ambition, my great ambition is to see drawing taught in the early grades, and not taught for art's sake, but for thinking. And along with teaching how to draw, teaching how to apply those skills to problem solving. And we're doing that with reading, writing, and arithmetic. We can do it with the visual skills as well. And they are only 5: edges, spaces, relationships, lights and shadows, and the gestalt. It's not hard to teach. Young kids can learn them. We've proven that. And then you can take it from there.
I had another question. Like you said at the very beginning, kids often they draw all the time, and then at a certain point they're told either you're good at it, you should keep going, or you're bad at it, which never happens with reading. Like no teacher will ever say you're bad at reading.
Oh, I'm so sorry. The sound is terrible here, and I'm missing some of your words.
Is it better like this?
That's better like that.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, and I was just saying, like you said earlier, at a certain point, a child is usually told that they're good or they're bad at drawing, and that'll kind of change the direction that they take, which is something that never happens with reading. Do you have any idea why that is? Like when we started considering art or drawing as fundamentally different from reading or writing in that sense?
Oh, that's such an interesting question. I think it must have started when universities set up schools of education. Those people who, as in UCLA, the Department of Education is very, very important, the School of Education. And the people who entered that field were people who were good with reading and with language and with problem solving with language. And because they became the people who taught teachers, the teaching was based on language. and how to teach language better, reading, writing, arithmetic, how to teach it better. And there was no interest whatsoever in teaching visual skills, as far as I know. I mean, I never encountered it. And so we end up with a nation full of teachers who have been pointed towards language and reading as the that's the main job, one of the main jobs, along with math and science, of course. But teaching visual skills, perceptual skills, how to see what's out there, how to see what's going on, how to make changes, how to see what's succeeding and what's not succeeding. All of that comes from the right hemisphere, which is largely not just ignored, but put down. Let's face it. I mean, for years, the right hemisphere was thought to be simply sort of filling the rest of the space in the skull, that it didn't have a function really, other than, you know, being able to name things that you see out there. But times are changing now. It's not working. The left brain system can end up with a very tragic result by going step by step and not watching what's going on the outside, what's going on in the surrounding space. So I think we have to change. My hope is that we'll change and teach people how to see what's going on. You know, it's in our language, certainly, that when people grasp the answer to a problem, they often say, now I see it. Now I see it. So we're aware of it at some level, but the schools have not caught up. And they need to catch up pretty quickly. Wonderful question. Yes, please.
Question. Hi, Study. My name is Jasmine. It's also my first time joining the Building 21 Roundtable. I'm a second-year McGill student studying psychology.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Can you get closer to a mic? The sound, I couldn't get the sound to turn up. So I'm.
Can you hear me now?
Really loud. Have a seat.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Hello. Can you hear me? Hi. Okay. So my name is Jasmine, and I'm an
Oops.
I came here with a question about how drawing can help us think in comparison with writing, and
How drawing can help you speak
think in comparison with writing.
Oh, that's so interesting. Right. I honestly, is your question how drawing can help you learn to speak? Is that your question?
No. How drawing can help with thinking and comparing with writing.
Thinking.
Think, she said.
Uh-huh.
She asked how it can help you think as compared to writing. Maybe not.
How as compared to writing helping you to think? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Yeah. As if I understand the question, how drawing can help you to
Type it, guys.
speak?
Repeat the question.
The question is how drawing can help your thinking compared to how writing helps your thinking.
Oh, I see, right. That's a wonderful question. I think writing does help you think, definitely. It does me, I know that. But so in thinking of my own experience of that, I think I am visualizing while I'm writing. So that learning to draw, which means learning to gain access to that part of the brain, I think the same kind of activation must go on in the best of writing, that you are visualizing while you are writing. Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I'm not sure I can answer it, but I will try. I think I have only my own experience for that. But I think the best writers are visualizing what they are writing about, and that the writing then, if they're good enough writers, that the writing then creates pictures in the mind of the reader, if you follow me. That's the best and the most valuable and the most treasured reading, is where you are not aware of reading the words, but you are visualizing what the author is writing about. Now, how one achieves that in writing, I'm really not sure about that, how I would answer that. I know myself that I could never write when someone else was present. I had to be alone. And that indicates that I was using the right hemisphere to visualize. I do remember in writing the book, I would have in mind as almost an image what I wanted to put down as an instruction or whatever. And I would not be able to find the words until finally I would say to myself, "Oh, Betty, just say it." And somehow that would trigger a kind of outpouring of this sort of more right hemisphere thing, which I would then go back and create and correct for grammar and spelling and all the rest of it. But I think that the best writing is guided by the right hemisphere, which is actually visualizing. And it has to be, you have to do that alone. It's not a team effort. I hope that answered in part. That was a tough question. Thank you.
Yeah,
I'll be thinking
I'm
about
sorry
that.
about the difficulty of the question, but I want to express my gratefulness for your speech. It's so inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I do appreciate that. Thank you so much. I am inspired by students always.
So we have a question from Arcana.
Yeah, my name is Arcana. I'm a first-year student in psychology. So my question is that I know that your area of focus is more in like drawing, but I was wondering if the same principles could be applied to something similar to drawing, which is like painting, but also something more like dancing, which would be like used to solve problem, like in a problem solving way, which could be like, yeah, could be taught as a problem solving way instead of just being taught as the sake of like becoming an artist.
Yes, yes. Well, I do think that, again, drawing is the basic skill, like learning to read is the basic skill. And from there, everything else develops, I think. In dancing, the enormous learning in dancing is, of course, physical movement. But it requires very likely a shift to right hemisphere, don't you think? Yes, must do. And that's probably true. It certainly is true of painting, I know. You lose track of language totally. You go silent in doing a painting. You can't talk. And if someone interrupts you, you could throw the paintbrush at them. Because it's a very pleasurable state. But I think that all of the arts require right hemisphere. Now, the job for us is to know how to access that part of the brain at will. And it's always something unexpected, as in drawing. The left brain doesn't want you to draw because it's going to be set aside for a time, and it wants to stay on, it wants to control things. It's very competitive, apparently, with its silent partner. So how do you deal with that? Well, in drawing or painting, I've done this myself. You say to yourself, I'm not really going to paint right now. I'll just fix up my palette and I'll pick up the brush and, well, maybe I'll make a few starts at this, but I'm not going to really paint. And you keep doing it. And finally, the left brain gets bored with the thing and drops out. And then you're on your way. But you have to, in some sense, if you really begin to understand your own brain, you realize that you have to take charge. It can control you. And it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be in control. You should be in control of your own brain. And so you can play these games with it, that you can play these tricks on it so that you get the result that you want. You get the drawing, you get the painting, and you're happy about that afterwards. And left brain probably says, oh, not bad, but you still got work to do, or whatever. It's always critical, you know. But the job is to control your own brain, to know how to do it. And the trick seems to be to simply present the brain with a job that the left brain will turn down. And it can be dance, can be music, piano playing, for example, can be drawing, can be painting, can be exercise. You say, I'm not going to exercise right now, but I'll just do this one thing. You're always trying to con your own left brain to get it to release its hold on us with language. And it's ruthless, you know. You can't paint now, or you can't practice dancing now, because you've got to go do the marketing for your mother. Or you can't start a drawing now. You've got to pay your bills. whatever. It always has, but its real reason is to stay on, to not release you to that wordless half of the brain. I think it's afraid you won't come back. And it's so pleasant over there that once you get there, you won't come back to it. But that's an impossibility because the right hemisphere state, which is a state while drawing, is fragile and ends instantly when someone says to you, "How's it going?" That's the end of it. Or it's time for you to start dinner now, or whatever. The interruption will pull you immediately out of right hemisphere. And then you have to start the whole process to get back into that state. But it's not a sleepy state or a restful state at all. It's highly alert, highly motivated, it is not like dreaming, but you're happy. Somehow you are embedded in the thing you're doing, and you long to be back there again. But you have to set up conditions to set aside the verbal brain for a time. But the state is very fragile. It's not dangerous in any sense. Not, I think parents are almost afraid sometimes to see their children become so engrossed in painting or drawing. But it's a very fragile state. And it's worth working for. Trust me on that.
Thank you so much. This was very insightful.
Thank you. We have time for.
Question.
Are there any remaining? We'll take another question or two.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Nikia.
Yeah. Talk very loudly.
Hi, I'm Nikia. My question is, I guess generally you have people, like if you present them with a lot of information, usually they like seeing it in a graph or in some kind of
Oh, I'm
visual.
so sorry. The sound is so terrible, but I don't want to lose your question.
Oh, yeah.
Bring it real close.
So generally, when people are presented with a lot of information or they're shown something, a lot of times it's really helpful for them to have it presented visually, like in a graph or in a graphic or some sort. And I was just wondering if that has anything to do with, because if people are taught to think in one way, and yet a lot of people, at least me, I still find it easier to look at things in a big picture format or in like a summary that is visual. And if that's just a personal preference or if that has something to do with what.
Oh, Darius, could you repeat her question?
Yeah.
The sound is just so bad.
Her question was, she said she enjoys it when information is presented visually or graphically, and was wondering if that's kind of a personal preference that some people have, or if it's a broader thing that people respond better to visual information that's presented.
That's interesting, right? That's interesting. It's in human history, sayings like a picture is worth 1,000 words. So I do think that images can supply enormous amounts of information rapidly and quite clearly, whereas reading is step by step, taking time, tracking, the various trains of thought and so on. So I do think that human beings, just over historical times, have found images to be full of information and easily grasped, whether as in the Middle Ages, when most people didn't read, paintings of religious subjects were relied on to tell the stories of the Bible and so on. So there's information is packed into visual images, and it's not step by step as in reading. The impact is instantaneous, actually. And at the same time, worthy of detailed study, as in religious paintings, for example. So it's two different kinds of information, and I think they each have a place in our lives. But in culture, everything is going towards imaging now with television. And for example, advertisers are taking full advantage of this. Advertising, and now I counted up the number of images, in separate images in one advertiser's announcement on TV. And there were 26 images within a couple of minutes. It was just flash, flash, flash. The right hemisphere can do that, and the advertisers have discovered it. So now we get flashed images rather than someone standing up there talking about the product for two minutes. And that will increase, I think, as time goes on, that the capabilities of the right hemisphere to comprehend instantly an image instantly will be exploited more and more and more. What that is going to do to the human brain is, up for grabs, I think. We need both. And we hope that both hemispheres will be trained up equally well. There's a new book out, by the way, by the British or Irish artist, author, Ian McGilchrist, who wrote a book called The Master and His Emissary. It was published, I think, in 2018. And that book has been extremely popular. He has a new book out. Could you find that? Oh, here it is, McGilchrist. He's written a new book, which is titled The Matter with Things. McGilchrist was one of the few famous people who have promoted right hemisphere equally to the left hemisphere. His first book, The Master and the Emissary, the title means that the master is now thought of as the left hemisphere, and the emissary is regarded as a servant who sees things and supplies information. But McGilchrist contends that the right hemisphere should be the master, and the left hemisphere should be the emissary or the servant to the master, the right hemisphere. He's written a new book in answer to all the critics of that theory. The master and his emissary was wildly popular, and McGilchrist has stuck to his guns. The new book, which I recommend to you, although it's in 2 volumes, it's 1,600 pages. It costs £89. So he does run on a bit. I've ordered the book, but I haven't read it yet. But that might be a very good book to start with, because he's highly qualified, brilliant, and very persuasive, and one of the few brilliant authors now who are promoting the idea that the right hemisphere should be the master after all. The title of the new book is The Matter with Things, which is, I'll have to read the book to make sure what he means by that. The Matter with Things by Ian McGilchrist. I do recommend that to you. If you have the time and money, that's a problem there. But at any rate, there is a movement in this way, and it would be wonderful if all of you, as young educators, would consider this in your teaching. You'll be doing nothing but good for your students. Right hemisphere can be the source of great joy in both learning and life itself. And at least the culture here in America is going the opposite way, I'm afraid. So I'm going to wish you all the best of luck in your careers, and with hopes that you will put your right hemisphere in the master's slot, and gain what really great asset it really is. It will do nothing but good for you. I promise you that. So thank you very much for all.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. And thank you, Darius, for.
Yes, thank you, Darius.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was a really enjoyable talk. And yeah, maybe if students have more questions, they can send an email at some point.
Oh, yes, indeed. You have my email?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed.
Okay.
Great.
Super. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.
Goodbye, goodbye.
Could you, once because it's been recorded on the picture, could you just send some details about how the corner?
This